Sorry, my dog's just started barking on cue. Croeso bawb, good morning, bore da. Diolch yn ymuno am ni heddiw, am dan siwr ddangos y dweud. Thank you for joining us today for the show and tell. We're going to get started in just a minute, just going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. So just to let you know that the session today is being recorded. So if you don't want to appear on the recording, please turn your cameras off, but you're also welcome to keep them on. I'll just start admitting last few people into the lobby. The session today is also going to be interactive. So we've got a Menti set up. So if you'd like to kind of get on there and get yourself sorted, we've got the QR code on the screen, and I'm going to post the link to join into the chat now. You can also go on to menti.com and use the code 71033354. And I'll just give everyone a minute to get onto that. The code will pop up as well as we go along today if you need. Right, James, are you ready?
Yes, thank you. Diolch. You go to the next slide, please. Diolch yn fawr. Shwmae, bore da, gweithio. Welcome to the show and tell from us here at CDPS. My name is James Graham. I'm delivery manager for this project. And this project is what capabilities do teams need to improve public services in Wales? So if we go to the next slide, please. So essentially today, this is the content of what we'll be running through. Show and tell will run for approximately 20 to 25 minutes with a 30-minute window for any questions and answers that you might have. Just to reiterate that, there will be Menti polls and it will be semi-interactive throughout the presentation. So yeah, if you've got a mobile, prefer to access it that way or through your laptop. Again, it's in the chat or the QR code that was previously on the screen. So if we go to the next slide, please. So I won't go through every single team member, but effectively, we're fortunate enough to work in a multidisciplinary team here at CDPS. We know that's not always possible in every setting. What matters most is making the best use of the expertise available and finding ways to collaborate effectively, regardless of team size or structure. So I'm going to hand over now to Peter Thomas, our Senior Responsible Officer and SLT member for this project, who will go through the why. Diolch.
Hello. Good morning. Diolch yn fawr, thanks, James. The why. So for me, this is really, really important. We have our digital service standard for Wales, which sets out what is expected of all good public services. It shows us what good looks like, and it shows people how to achieve them through the developing service manual. But once somebody understands what the service standard requires of their service, and they begin to read the service manual to think about how they're going to do those things, they're going to very quickly realise, as we have heard in our research, that they do not necessarily have the capabilities within their existing teams to meet those standards. They're going to realise we don't have anybody who knows how to do X, Y, or Z. What do we do? What skills or what capabilities, what knowledge, what experience, what do we need in our team to be able to start our journey to meeting the service standard and making the services that we deliver good? That's the why. We are hoping in this work to establish what skills are required, what capabilities are needed, and there's a difference, and I think there's a definition coming up as to what the difference between those are. But essentially, there's a gap that's been noted between the resources and the templates available for creating digital services and the capabilities within the organisations. Most organisations can't simply hire digital talent in straight away. There's no defined or well-defined training pathways to help existing staff gain the skills needed And we see quite, in lots of cases, old-fashioned technical teams or data teams and a serious lack of digital skills and user-centered design skills. So it's the whole breadth of the standards, but this work is all about identifying and assessing the capabilities needed. If I'm a manager of a team or a leader of a team, how do I know I've got the capabilities in my people to be able to do the things that are required by the standard? Okay, on to the next slide, please. And this is a chance for you to contribute to this. What do you think? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this, basically. What do you think are the capabilities needed to improve services? So hopefully you're on the Menti link. You can see the code at the top there if you haven't joined already. Just menti.com and type in 7103 3354. And hopefully we'll have some responses. Thanks, Elise. UCD skills, UCD user needs. It's lovely to see these coming in live. Thank you very much. UCD coming through strongly. I wonder who's in the audience watching this today. But I think you're right. I do think you're right. Risk is a really crucial one as well. You're right. User research. Leaders, indeed, who have enough knowledge to ask. Yeah, and support teams. That's really important. Digital leadership. So while these answers are coming in, I'm just going to add a little bit more, if that's all right. So the digital leadership piece for me is really, really important. We do need leaders who know the questions to ask. They need to have the power to structure things in a way that works for the team that are working on the service and service improvement. It's a difficult job. We have our digital leadership program up and running, the Leading Modern Public Services program. Oh, it was got a message. I wanted to do a few more, so thank you very much. But yeah, that digital leadership piece is critical for setting the direction. Okay, I wonder, responses seem to have slowed down. Should we move on to the next one, please? Just try to keep us moving along. Thank you very much for your responses. This is a rather dodgy looking picture here, but the idea is there's a bit of a gap in the road, or the bridge in this case, for services to meet the digital service standard. If that's the direction they're traveling in, that's the destination, is meeting the standard, then you can see that great big JCB, Jack Cody Bow, as they are in Welsh, dropping in the big block of capabilities to fill that gap. If you don't have the right capabilities in your organisation, in your teams, then how on earth are you going to meet the digital service standard? That's where we fit with this work. Okay, I think that's it from me, and I'm handing over now to the how.
I'm the how. So how will we... So how are we tackling the problem? So next slide, please, Elise. We currently have 3 work streams. So we have research, service design and learning outcomes. Each of these work streams have their own objectives, which outline the specific tasks and actions that we are taking to ensure we meet the goals for this part of the project. Next slide, please, Elise. So work stream 1 is research. We've been hearing anecdotally that public services in Wales are facing challenges in understanding the capabilities they need in teams to improve the services to meet the digital service standard for Wales. Next slide. So I'll just leave this one up for you to read.
These are just some quotes that we've had from informal conversations. Next slide, please. So we are currently conducting exploratory research to validate this. Part of this involves building on our previous insights that we have already within CDPS from other projects. We are conducting informal interviews with senior leaders and CDOs and feeding these insights back to the team. In the next week, we'll be conducting interviews with service owners, so talking to the types of roles and people who are accountable for and oversee the day-to-day delivery of public services in Wales, who lead, manage and organise training for staff that are creating, improving or delivering public services in Wales, and those that are aware and recognise the importance of user-centred design and the digital service standard, and ideally or actively trying or aware of the need to build the digital skills such as service design, user research and agile methodologies. These individuals and teams can be at the beginning of their journey or partway through developing the skills in these teams. And we're keen to hear from these individuals to help us understand some of the barriers they may be facing in identifying the capabilities their teams need to deliver and improve their services. Next slide. So I'm passing on now to James.
Bore da, James ydw i. So I'm a training and learning designer here at the Centre for Digital Public Services. And as part of this work, as Sarah mentioned earlier regarding the kind of different work streams that we have going on, I've been creating a set of capabilities. Ultimately, these are the things that we feel kind of teams need to be able to do to deliver good services. But what do we mean when we actually kind of talk about capabilities? And this is where we're going to, or we want to hear from you. So we're going to flip back over to Menti. And I want to find out what the word capabilities kind of means to you. What springs to mind when you hear that term? So we've got some responses coming in now. So we've got quite a few coming in. Okay, so whilst the last few do come in, it's interesting just to note, you know, some of the responses mentioning this kind of combination of different things. I can see knowledge, skills, experience, attitude, skills, abilities, motivation, behaviors, balance of culture, skills, knowledge, time, permission, support. Having all these different things is obviously really, really important. The ability to do something, people have kind of captured that in a nutshell. I really like the things in my toolbox. And the other one is where is it? The ability and skills to actually be able to do something, because yeah, we need to be able to kind of put those things into practice, not just a case of knowing how to do something. It's actually, you know, how do we utilize that much more effectively? So if we can switch over at least to the next slide. So we've used Emily Webber's definition of capabilities because we feel that she kind of summarized it perfectly. She recognized, like many of you just have in the Menti responses, that there's a combination of different factors that kind of inform the capabilities that we have. And the three she uses, which actually a few people mentioned in their responses, is this idea of having the knowledge, the skills, and the experience to be able to do something effectively. You can switch, please. So these are some definitions of those specific things, that idea of having those knowledge, those skills and experience. And we liken this kind of to going on a course as an example. You know, if you attend a training course, we're likely to give you the kind of knowledge, the skills to be able to do something. But actually, to do it really well in practice, you need that experience of actually putting it into place, of actually applying those skills that you learn. You need to have a go at putting it together in a real context. That's what's going to ultimately give you the deepest learning and enable you to utilize those kind of knowledge and skills that you've gained much more effectively in future. And we often kind of have a running joke on our courses. People often ask a question like, what would I use when such and such a scenario? And I think quite often, annoyingly for participants at least, we answer that it depends. And that's really because, there's a range of different factors that kind of influence, how we would apply those skills. It's rarely, if ever, kind of black and white of in this scenario, you'd use this, and in this scenario, you'd use this. Ultimately, kind of getting much more adept and much more attuned to making those decisions only comes from having that experience. That's why it's critical to have all those three components so that you can apply this effectively. Next slide, please, Elise. So what does that actually look like in the context of the piece of work that we're doing? So we've looked at some kind of existing lists of capabilities that already exist out there from a range of kind of different contexts. And in particular, we've looked at examples that are in use in public sector organizations. And the whole aim of that is to understand kind of how people are currently mapping these capabilities to their particular roles. So that we're trying to create something that kind of feels familiar to users right off the bat, hopefully makes it something that they can kind of pick up and use straight away. Next slide, please, Elise. That's the one. So here's kind of an example of just one of the capabilities that are on our list. And this particular one is focused on designing content. Now, I've just chosen one in this instance because actually many of the other capabilities on our list, they follow this similar kind of format. So hopefully this will kind of give you a flavor. I appreciate it might appear quite small on your screen at the moment, but we will be sharing a link afterwards where you'll be able to kind of see this in full. Now, as you mentioned, we've got that overarching capability of kind of designing content, but within each of within that, we've kind of broken it down into the more tangible things people can do. So we've got the outcome, first of all, what is it we're actually looking to be able to achieve? What are we expecting teams to be able to do? And then alongside that, a kind of descriptor explaining, what does this look like in practice? And the aim of this is to make it as kind of practical as possible so that we can actually lead kind of tangible change as a result. Now, as Pete mentioned earlier, this is contributing towards working towards the digital service standard. So what you'll see as well is a column where we've mapped each of these to relevant points on the digital service standard, looking at kind of where the crossover is so that we can demonstrate how the things that we're trying to do help us work towards that standard. We're also mapping existing learning materials that we've developed to this as well. And the whole aim, as mentioned earlier, is to develop those kind of learning pathways that are currently missing to get people on the road of developing these capabilities. Now, in terms of how we've actually got to this point so far, we started by kind of identifying the capabilities that are present within a typical team that's kind of tasked with designing services that meet user needs. And we kind of considered, well, if we're pitching this at a certain target user, what is appropriate, what's at the right level for those. And we've reviewed these with kind of senior professionals in different fields to kind of establish whether, first of all, it's actually an accurate representation of what they're trying to achieve. Is it actually pitched at the right level for the user groups that we're targeting? Whether we've included anything that shouldn't be there or vice versa, is there anything obvious that we've missed? And we've gone through that kind of process many times. We've already iterated this list a number of different times. I think we're on our 7th version, kind of modifying that and adapting it based on that feedback that we've received. And obviously, as we gather more feedback moving forward, it's going to kind of change and evolve as we progress. So to round this off, I wanted to connect back to something that Peter mentioned earlier when kind of talking about the why. So if you can switch over, Elise. It was just an excuse to show his brilliant picture again, but it does ultimately summarize really well kind of the position of where we're kind of pitching this. We hope that those capabilities are the thing that helps kind of bridge that gap because we know it's not easy. We know it is a challenge. And really, that's why we need your help and your input, your feedback to ensure that what we produce is kind of fit for purpose for you. So for the last time, we're going to head back over to Menti to give you a voice. And this time we've got a bit of a different question. What capability what capabilities are barriers to meeting the digital service standard? So where are those pinch points, do you feel? What are your priorities of the places you're looking to develop? Some coming in now. Okay, so we've got a bit of a cluster really around that kind of user needs piece. One at the top in the center there, this whole, the idea of the middle section of that whole idea of meeting user needs is unrealistic, but actually, as the one to the right points out, that can be a game changer if we can do it effectively. Understanding how our users use our services, customizing kind of off-the-shelf products, but sitting alongside that is this whole idea of research. How do we find out what our users actually need? And then there's another theme around these kind of the absence of kind of that technical knowledge, technical skills, information, data security, and so on and so forth. And actually how we analyze that data. How do we actually generate those kind of meaningful insights from that data that's going to actually inform, the next steps that we look to take. So that's really useful insights that can help us then kind of define, what are the capabilities that we need to focus on. But I'm going to hand back over to Sarah at this point to start to think about how we can gather some more feedback from you moving forward.
Thank you. So we're hoping that this presentation has been thought-provoking, and if any of this has resonated with you and you fall into the category of those individuals who are accountable for and oversee the day-to-day delivery of public services, or who lead, manage and organise training for staff that are creating, improving or delivering public services in Wales, then please get in contact with us. We have links in the chat to our email and our screener surveys, and we'd love to hear from you, so please get in contact. So I think that's the end of our presentation, and we'll take any questions now.
Yep, so don't all ask at once, but Harriet, first question, if you'd like to ask.
Thanks, James. I mean, to me, this is a really important part of that offer around. It's all very well to have the service standard, and we all know it's great, but how on earth do you make it real? And it is a journey, we know, for all service owners. So for me, the way I very simply describe our offer is, here's the service standard at the top. Then there's the service manual, as in, okay, then how do I do this? Then there's the offer of a service assessment, kind of, well, how am I doing then? And why can't I do this at the moment? And part of the answer then is the insights that you'll get from the minimum viable capabilities. I know that's not all we're calling it at the moment. What are we calling it at the moment? Because someone just remind me, what are we calling it now?
Just capabilities needed, because there is no minimum type thing, so it's just capabilities needed.
Yeah, so to me, that almost has to be those elements and other things that we do hang together as a kind of, here's the goal, how can I do that then? How am I doing? and who do I need, where are the gaps, it really hangs together as an offer for people who are kind of, seeking to improve their services. And I'm really interested in what is the user experience of someone who is interested, looks at the user, the service standard, the manual, maybe thinks about having an assessment, maybe he's wondering I am really interested in how that hangs together as a service offer for users. So I suppose my question is, how might we express this to service owners or teams? Do we envisage this being a guide? Is it something we might say, well, here's the guide, and if you want to talk to us about it, we can come and have a look? Just wondering about how we might offer it.
I don't want to speak for our user researchers, but I think the key for us as a project is to get more user research done. So we can't say what we need right now, is that we actually need to speak to service owners, leaders. Libna, would you like to jump in here? But yeah.
Hello. Hiya, can you hear me? I just basically want to say, like, we're not the users. I think we need to talk to the users to know what's their needs first, to understand if is it some sort of guidance, is it some sort of kind of a form or sort of assessment which we need to tackle with them, and what's best for the users really. So at the moment, we're still not too sure yet. We're still in the process of talking to people and understanding their needs first, and then later hopefully we'll come up with a solution. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks a bit. So yeah, part of what our ask is any service owners, any leaders in any part of the public sector that we know have a relationship with, or can ask or lean on or get in touch with, because there's lots of different levels of maturity within organizations. There's no one size fits all approach. That's something we're acutely aware of from initial research. So it's about talking to as many people as possible to get as many viewpoints of their pain points, to hopefully be able to help them and help each other really in this sector. So that's really our ask to everybody participating today, and also thank you for coming along. So yeah, are there any more questions thus far? Alan, jump in.
Thank you. Obviously, this is very focused on capabilities that are needed to meet the standard. Have you gone back a stage into what skills you'd need? Skill being I can prioritize, or I can write something down, which would then lead to me being able to do something and have a capability or as part of a team. Because I think some of the gaps that you've talked around is there are people there, they might not be a user researcher or a product manager, but they might have the skills that they don't know would make them able to do something, have a capability. Have you gone that stage, backwards from a capability into the skills you'd need to meet that capability?
Want to take that one?
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really good question, Alan, because that's what we're kind of seeing as I guess, archetypal user, that person that's already sat in a role that can look at this and say, oh yeah, I do a bit of this in my role. I have some of those skills that can kind of transfer over to this. So that's something we've started to kind of capture in some of those descriptors. But I think the point you raised is a really interesting one then, of having maybe, some of those more specifics instead in terms of, prioritization, facilitation, those, I guess, more tangible things
skills,
that don't always kind of obviously pop out through a descriptor. So that could be the next stage in terms of things that we can start to add to make that much more obvious and much more transparent of users, that they can start to then identify those things. Because they might read the descriptor and actually think, oh, I'm not sure if I can do that. But then when we start looking at some of those more transferable skills, that might resonate more. So yeah, I think that's a really good kind of logical next step. Things like prioritization, as you mentioned, starts to tag some of those transferable skills. I think, yeah, that's something we can consider to kind of take it up a level and make it much more applicable to people. Thank you.
Awesome.
Good idea.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Alan. Are there any more questions that would anyone like to ask, or feel free to pop it in the chat if you don't want to speak on the microphone, or also Jana's kindly popped in the screener forms already. So if you want to share that to your network, or email us at user.research@digitalpublicservices.gov.wales. So that's in the chat of this meeting. Yeah, reach out in any way that you feel comfortable or it's accessible to you. Yeah, and if there's, I'll just let an awkward silence hang for a couple more seconds if there's any more questions. No tiny yellow hands on my screen, so I will assume that's that for today. Just want to say thanks again for everyone for taking time out of their day to come here today. As this project progresses, there's we'll be covering a lot of different user groups potentially, so a lot of different people in the sector. So it's an important piece of work, and we appreciate everyone coming today and giving their time. Thank you ever so much. Diolch yn fawr. Well, bye-bye.
Diolch.